Georgia Hortin, now a resident at Brookdale Senior Living, moved to Bonita Springs in 1957 from Villa Grove, Illinois. Her husband's teaching career brought them to Florida all those many years ago. They were delighted to move to such a beautiful area. Her husband loved to go fishing, and they already had family residing in the area. Mrs. Hortin had crocheted during the time that she lived in Illinois, but never had been involved in basket making. Shortly after arriving in Bonita Springs, she became acquainted with a neighbor who was teaching a basket class at the Bonita Springs Women's Club. Mrs. Hortin expressed an interest in learning the art of basketry, but was unable to attend the meetings. Since she was not able to leave her two small sons at home, her neighbor offered to give her private lessons. The lessons began, and she quickly learned how to make baskets. She has been passionate about the art of basketry and has been making them for the past 60-plus years. Mrs. Hortin describes her Florida hobby as the biggest investment of time and least investment of money. She makes the baskets from items such as pine needles and palm fronds that she finds on the ground around her apartment. She explains that the best time to pick up the pine needles is right after the summer rains, because it brings the needles to the ground. She picks up many in the summer and keeps them in her storage to use throughout the winter season, because during those months they are more dry and brittle. The baskets are stitched together using raffia. Raffia and sewing needles are the only expense of this beautiful hobby.
Now, one of these can be made in a day. Here's another necklace made with a shell. These baskets are made from pine needles, which I used to pick up right outside my window on the south sidewalk, but now they forbid me to pick up since I fell once. But they pick them up in their yards and along the side of the road, anywhere there are pine needles. And then they bring them in and wash them in hot water and cut off the caps and get them ready to work into baskets. Now, if they're making a small basket, the pine needles have to be damp and flexible. And then you've got another one in it. If you're making a big basket and are going to be working big, they don't have to be damp and so flexible. But once they are dampened, they have to be wrapped in paper towels, put in a plastic bag, and kept in the refrigerator or freezer so they don't mildew.
Where about is your place in there? We live on New Orleans, so we're like there's one family that when they come.
How long does a basket like that take you to make?
Oh, it takes several hours. But I would say 5 to 6 hours. It's the one hobby in Florida that requires the biggest outlay of time and the least outlay of money. For binding, you can use raffia or wax linen, sinew, any kind of embroidery thread, any kind of binder.
Many different types of basket making groups exist, such as the Nantuckets, who often use rattan and black ash wood. The type of baskets that Mrs. Hortin makes is coil baskets. The art of coil basketry originated with the Indians about 9,000 years ago. Many tribes today, such as the Seminoles and Miccosukee tribes, use this technique in their basket making. Realizing the beauty of this art form, she became dedicated to keep the ancient art of coil basketry alive. Georgia has taught others in her home and now in the Activity Center at Brookdale, where she now resides. She loves to talk about her basket making and states, "It's not just about the baskets, but about the relationships with people." And she continues, "The Basketeers are truly God's gift to me in my old age." Basketeers meet every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. The group attendees come from the surrounding community and are comprised of people from Bonita Bay, San Carlos, and the Naples area, as well as other fellow residents of Georgia's. They get together to make baskets, wreaths, necklaces, picture frames, and other objects using pine needles, palm fronds, and blossoms, or other natural materials in very creative ways. Coil basketry originated with the Indians about 9,000 years ago. The Brookdale Basketeers are dedicated to keeping this ancient art alive. The coil, or warp, may be pine needles, palm fronds and blossoms, or dried grasses. The binding, or weft, may be raffia, heavy linen, cotton, or nylon threads. The stitches are the same as used in sewing and embroidery: single overcast, double overcast, backstitch, blanket stitch, etc. Among the materials needed to get started, you have pine needles, raffia, and a darning needle. The coil is held in the desired shape and is secured there by the stitching, round and round, row by row. Using this method, there is no limit to the size, shape, and variety of the baskets that can be made.
And then pick up a bunch of pine needles and start binding them to the wrapping. And then the next, to make a ring basket, I make a flat surface, then go out and go up and go in, and this is the finished ring basket. But the pine needles have to be damp and flexible. And when you come to the end, you just quit adding and bind it all down. And as you're working, you keep your coil built up by adding pine needles, spread the coil apart, push in the pine needles, and then bind them down with this single overcast stitch. And the basket class has been such a wonderful blessing for my last years. I just have tried to teach them the basics of making a basket, and they have just taken off and done such wonderful work. But I'm content just to make my ring baskets and my necklaces. If anything sticks out, just cut it off or break it off. I'm on the row now where I'm going up. To go up, you hold the pine needles straight and bring the stitch in to bind them in that position. To go out, you would hold the coil out and bind it in that position. To go in, you would hold it in and bind it in that position. But so far, on this row, I'm just going straight up. I've been doing this for over 50 years. I was taught by a neighbor when we first moved to Benita Springs in 1957. I like to do it because it not only produces a useful item, but it's very relaxing and very therapeutic.
The Brookdale Basketeers have dedicated themselves to keeping the ancient art of coil basketry alive. The Basketeers make baskets, wreaths, necklaces, picture frames, and much more using pine needles, palm fronds, blossoms, and other natural materials in a very creative way.